An array is a data structure that holds a predetermined amount of variables, called values. These values are typically all of the same data type. One way to think about arrays is that it is essentially a row of P.O. boxes. A P.O. box has a number and content. In an array, each element has an index and a value. To show things more practically, I have prepared a diagram. On the left, we have a series of integer variables. On the right, we have a single array containing all the same values. Along the top of the array are the index values for each element. Note that arrays in most languages start at 0. Importantly, an array can be passed to a function or method as a single value, where if we were to use single variables like we have on the left, we would have to pass 8 arguments to the function. It would be an absolute nightmare to keep track of that many arguments. Now, let's look at some Java code. Here we are in Java, and I have shown the two main ways you want to declare a new array. The first one is just int new array. So that's an array of integers, and it says equals new int, the square brackets, and then 7. So this is a integer array of size 7, and in Java, in new int array, all the default values will just be 0. So this is just an array of size 7, and each one is going to just be 0. Underneath, I have int literal array. So the square brackets, again, indicating that this is going to be an array, is new int. And then instead, this is fed the values of what should initially be in this array. So these are the two main ways you're going to make a new array in Java. I've prepared this function, find average. And this function right now, it'll take in 2 integers, and then it'll just return the double value that is just the average of the 2 numbers. So we have system.out print find average 2, 3. So you would expect this to just return 2.5. So let's go ahead and run this. And yes, we do get 2.5. Now let's say you wanted it to be 3 numbers. Let's do 2, 3, 5. Then in here, we're going to need a third variable, int z. And then this will be x plus y plus z. And then it's going to be divided by 3. So that was simple enough, turning it from 2 to 3. But now this function, it's kind of bad because it's like, no matter what, it's only going to be able to find the average of like a certain amount of arguments. There is a better way. Instead of taking in just ints, just like one at a time, one argument at a time, let's instead take an entire array. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to change our arguments to just take in a single int array. So int array x. Instead of just adding these variables, we have to loop through our entire array, add them together, and then divide it by the length of our array. To have a running total, we're going to just have an int total equals 0. And then let's get rid of this. Let's have a for loop that's going to start at for int I equals 0. So 0 is always the first term within an array. I is less than x dot length. So this is just like an important function you should know. Like anytime you need the length of an array, you can just do the array's name dot length. And we're going to do less than the total length because we don't want to go beyond the end of our array. So if an array is size 6, the last element is going to be 5 because remember, the array starts at 0. So if we did less than or equals to, we'd have an array out of bounds exception. And then we're going to do plus plus I. And then each element we're going to just add to total. So total equals total plus and then x, and then I. So it's just going to get the ith element of the x array. And then at the end, we just need to divide it by the length and then return it. So we can say return total divided by double dot value of x dot length. And this should return our average no matter what array we pass in here. But there is one corner case we actually have to take care of here. Let's say you get past an empty array, just like an array of size 0. Well, this for loop is never going to get run, and then total is just going to be 0, but it's going to divide it by 0, so 0 over 0. So that's going to give you an exception for dividing by 0. So let's just check that. And we're going to say if x.length is less than 1, we're going to return, let's just return the double value of 0. Okay, so now we can try to run this. So instead of system.out.println find average with the 3 numbers, let's just pass this a single integer array. So we're going to just pass this literal array. And yeah, let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. So for this literal array, it's going to be, 10. So 10 over 4. So this should give us an average of 2.5. So we ran this and we got 2.5. So this is working, and this will work no matter how long the array is. So like if we just keep adding numbers here, let's do like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We don't have to change our function at all because like we're still just passing it the one array. The array is just longer now. So I hope you're starting to see like the power of using arrays as arguments for functions. And yes, so we ran it with this new values in the array, and we got 5 as our average. Now, there's actually a refinement you can do in Java. You actually don't need to use a for loop like this. You can actually use what is called a for each loop. So we can say for int number in x, total equals total plus number. So what this is basically saying is for all the values in x, you just do this. And then by having this number set, that will be the local variable that we can use within our for each loop. So let's go ahead and run this. And we get the same value, the 5.0. So the for each loop is just something that you can use anytime you're using an array, and you can just run through an entire array. It'll just save you a little bit of typing. It'll make your code a little bit cleaner. Now, one more thing you should be aware of is the idea of multi-dimensional arrays. So for each value in this array, it's just going to give an int. But you can have it so that each value in an array is itself an array, and then within that array you can have a value. To illustrate that, we can do something like int array. So this is going to be a 2-dimensional array, and we'll call this grid equals new int, and we'll do an array of size 7 in both dimensions just to make it simpler. So this is an array where each array, the value is an array of size 7, and then those are int arrays. Now, you might be wondering, like, where would be a good case for this? Like, why would I ever want to use this? And I sort of alluded to this with the name grid. You can use a 2-dimensional array where each side, so like one side could be the x value and then the y value. So say you get like 0, 0, that could be like the top left corner representation of a grid. You can even do a 3-dimensional array if you want to have, say, like a 3-dimensional cube and just have all the values of like what that value is within that cubic space. Now, you should definitely be careful when using multi-dimensional arrays. The most important thing anytime you're programming is clarity. Like, people really need to know what you're doing and why you did it. If you see like an array that's more than 2 dimensions, and even sometimes a 2-dimensional array can be like difficult to understand what they're doing, you might want to find a better way of doing it. Like, I have seen something where it's like, instead of having a new type of object, like using, good object-oriented programming principles, they would have like a multi-dimensional array, and like each dimension of the array is a value that could have just been like a variable within the object itself. And that's just like not good programming. And a lot of times you can just like go through and do the refactor to make your code cleaner and more readable. But it's definitely something you should be aware of, because like you might be run into some old code where like somebody is using these arrays. So multi-dimensional arrays are just another tool in your toolbox, but most of the times you're just going to be using the single-dimensional array. And that's all I really have today about arrays. If you have any questions or video ideas, you can leave them in the comments. Thanks, and have a great day.